Hello and welcome to Nanapod, a podcast dedicated to the fantastic manga written by A. Yazawa. I'm Crystal, and I'm joined by my best girl Kirsten as we dissect this manga, discussing everything from the emotions, the cultural impact, as well as any headcanons that might be floating around in our brains. With this podcast, we hope to preserve a shoujo staple that sadly hasn't been talked about in a very long time. So come with us. We're waiting for you in apartment 707. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nanapod. So we are starting a new volume here, volume 16. So we'll just kind of read the story part. And it's like the story of Nana. Nana, Hachi, Komatsu, and Nana Osaki meet by chance on a train headed for Tokyo. Their personalities and the environments they grew up in are very different, but by fate or by chance, they meet again and become roommates. Blast is on tour. Nana decides to make her marriage to Ren official when they get back to Tokyo, but Weekly Search sends her a shocking photo of Ren and Rira together. To stop the story from going to print, Takumi quickly ties the knot with Hachi and offers up their marriage as a scoop to Search in exchange. Meanwhile, Rira, worried about her status as Trap Nest singer, breaks it off with Shin. When Hachi tells Nana that she got married, it makes Nana feel even lonelier, and she has a panic attack. She vents her real thoughts to Ren and tells him that she doesn't understand her own feelings. Ren tells her to think it over carefully. Right after Blast returns to Tokyo, Trap Nest is about to go to the UK for a 2-month recording session. As the day approaches, everyone is brooding over their complicated situations. So we are starting here in chapter 58. And we have the think boxes saying, "I will wait forever for the day you get up on your feet again." And then there's some fireworks. And it says, "It was like fireworks, the dreams we dreamt, where floods of light and explosions of sound that fill the darkness, a festival that blinds the eye." And now there is more fireworks, and then a picture of a place called Agorad, and then there's a creak of a door, and there's an old man saying in English, "What can I get ya?" And this is the other mosquito man. He says, "A pint of Guinness, please." And the man says, "Coming right up." And then there's a piano playing, and then there is a woman here with long hair, and it looks like it might be dyed blonde, or it's gone back to its natural color. We never really know because this part was never animated. And then we see she's wearing this really beautiful dress, and there's just the peak of the Ren flower from under the sleeve of the dress. And then she's singing into this really cool old 1930s microphone, and there is a ring on her finger. And the mosquito man is looking at her with just kind of this very tired, very searching expression. And then there's a boom of fireworks. And now this guy, if we have a scene change to, I believe, an apartment. And he's on the phone, and there's the boom boom outside of the fireworks. And he says, "It's Karada." "What? Oh, sorry, these fireworks are insane." "Yeah, really, fireworks. It's not for some summer event. Apparently it's a festival that commemorates the Houses of Parliament not getting blown up. No, it happened like 400 years ago." And then he's sliding this shut. And then he's like, "I couldn't find Nana." So I'm assuming, hold on. So he's probably in the UK, and it must be the 5th of November if I had to take a guess. But Kurata continues and says, "It was another false lead. I can't do this job anymore. You should forget about it too, Mr. Kudo." And then there's a boom outside. And he says, "There's no reason to keep searching. The rumors are true. Nana from Blast is dead. She died at sea." And like, he's saying this, but on his desk, there's all these pictures of Nana. And she's clearly older, and her hair is very long, and very blonde and or white. And, well, it's kind of nice, that he's saying that. Mostly because it's like, well, you were really scummy and you ruined her life all the way back in the day. So you should make up for it, absolutely. And anyway, we have narration, and this is from Nana. And we haven't actually heard this in a while. And she says, "Hey, Hachi, it's almost time for the first fall of snow at the beach this year. When I look up at those off-season fireworks alone, the loneliness I thought I learned to manage starts to run wild, and there's nothing I can do." And then we're slingshotted back into the past, and there's a whap of a drumstick, and it's Nana, and she's singing, angrily singing, and there's a guitar playing, and more drums, and just the spectacle of Blast. And then there's some kind of like director, and he's like, "Yeah, that's it. All right, good job." And then he's like, "Hey, Nana," says, "Please, let me talk to you for just a second, Heart." That's gotta be another paparazzi. And Masato says, faux Masato is like, "Sorry, we're in a hurry." And then there's more paparazzi, and they're like, "Did you and Ren get married yet? How did you get to be friends with Takumi's wife? Did you see today's weekly chart?" And Nana turns around and says, "We told you we're busy, so leave us alone." And then there's a slam of a car door, and vroom as it drives away. And this paparazzi's like, "She broke my heart." And the other guy is like, "What was that? Nana sucks. I waited 2 hours." And then they're like, "They're babies on the scene. Who do they think they are? Ugh. People only care about Blast because of Ren." And then there's a phone, and it says, "Trust Trap Nest," and there's a beep beep, "Blast Blackstones." And it's Nobu, and he's just looking at his phone. And Genpai says, "Don't worry about the weekly charts. Just look at sales totals. We're still ahead." And Yasu says, "I mean, we've sold this much. It's enough already. What I'm worried about is our next single." And Shin says, "I think Nana's worried about it too." And Nobu says, "Yeah, me too." And then Shin looks over him like, "Oh, you're worried?" And Jin says, "It pisses you off. Oh, if it pisses you off, write more new songs. Don't just sit around doing it with Yuri." And Nobu says, "I am writing songs, but Mr. Matsuo says no to all of them. But then Tanuki compliments me." And Yasu says, "Well then, of course, those are no good. They won't sell." And Shin says, "But I think they're way cooler than that first single they messed with so much." And Nobu says, "I know, right? Blast isn't even punk anymore. That's why people say we're visual kai." And I actually don't know what that is, so I'm going to go look that up. Let's see. According to Wikipedia, visual kai, abbreviated V-kai, is a subculture and category of Japanese musicians that have a strong focus on extravagant stage costumes that originated in Japan during the early 1980s. Okay, I mean, that makes sense. It's also got like glam rock, shock rock, heavy metal, goth rock, and yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Especially if they're changing their songs, that would make a lot of sense. And Genpai says, "You can't write good songs when you worry too much about what people say. What's wrong with visual kai anyway? Looking hot is important." Oh, Genpai. You are eaten by that pretty culture. Mm-mm. But Shin says, well, if you worry about the charts, then write something more mainstream. And Nobu says, but it's not like sales or everything. And Yasu says, we chose to go pro, so just do it. And Nobu looks defeated. Very defeated. Then there's a vroom of the car. And now we have a scene change. And it's Junko. And she says, it looks great on you. It's vintage 60s, one of a kind. But it looks like it was made just for you, Heart. And then Hachi's like, really, Heart? And she's wearing this just adorable little outfit. Yes, very, very 1960s. I could speculate on the color, but I'm not going to. And then Junko's like, and we have just the shoes to go with it. They're our shop's own brand, and they're flats, safe for pregnant women. And Hachi's like, oh, they're so cute, Heart. And then she's like, how about a purse to go with it? And she's like, give me that, with all the hearts in her eyes. And then Hachi turns around and she's like, can I get it all? And Takumi is here, and he's like, sure, whatever you want, hon. And she's like, eek, Heart, thank you, I love you, Heart. And June's turned away, and she's got the dots, and she's like, give me a break. And then Hachi is just going off to the changing room to change her clothes back, and she's happy because she's whistling. And then Junko was like, here's your total, Mr. Ichino's. 129,150 yen. So that's 1,120 in our dollars. And he says, oh, that's cheap. And Junko looks annoyed. And he's like, do you take plastic? I'll charge it all, Heart. And she goes, hey, Takumi. And he says, yeah. And she's leaned in real close, and she's got that angry face. And she's like, look, don't spoil Nana so much. Do you want to make her even more ridiculous? Don't let her run wild. Train her. And he has this very gentle smile. And now Junko's got like the dots and little blushes, and he goes, all right, Mom. And she's like, I ain't her mom. I wouldn't give birth to a stupid daughter like that. And Takumi says, well, today is special. Tomorrow I'm going overseas to work for 2 months. So we're celebrating her birthday in advance. Please let this one slide. And she's like, oh, her birthday. I almost forgot. And now Takumi's kind of laughing, and he's like, please don't forget. And then she's like, all right, you're off the hook today, but just today. And he's like, thank you, June, Heart. And now we have a scene change as they've left the shop. And he's like, where to next, my dear, Heart? And she's like, to your home, Heart. And he's like, home? And then there's these 2 schoolgirls in the back, and they're like, hey, that's Takumi with his wife. And they're like, really? Oh, she says, it's your birthday next month, Takumi, so I'll buy you a present too, Heart. And he goes, oh, with the allowance I gave you? What's the point of that? Don't waste money. June will get mad at you. And now she's got the dots and like a little leaf over her head. And now she's got like this, oh really? Look, and he said, the point is that I'm going to pick something that looks good on you. And then he just smiles over at her. And now we have a scene change back to the car, and Nana's trying to light her lighter. She's going flick, click, 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 click. And then Masato, who is sitting next to her, flicks a lighter of her own, and Nana looks at her kind of shocked. And then she's thinking to herself, you don't smoke, so why do you carry a lighter around? I'm irritated at my lighter that won't light, and the paparazzi that won't leave me alone, and at Masato, who's always up in my business. Why does everything annoy me? I mean, she was just helping, but you know. Now she's like stressed and is still thinking, well, I know the reason why, but there's so many things I don't know what the hell is going on. I gotta do something, or else I'll turn into the most annoying thing of all. And then she says, Masato? Masato says, yes. And she says, today all we have is a fashion mag shoot, right? What's everyone else's schedule? And she says, okay, Yasu has a meeting at Gaia. Nobu and Shin have an interview with some men's magazine. And Nana, with his very fake smile, is like, then let's all go out to karaoke after that. And Masato says, what? But Ren will be waiting for you back at your new place. And she says, it doesn't matter. If I go home, he'll just make me cook for him. It was easier living in the hotel. And Masato says, but he's leaving for London tomorrow. That's why Mr. Genpai changed the schedule so things will be finished early today. And Nana says, I'd rather just sing. Singing one song isn't enough. Why don't we get jobs where I get to sing more? I'm not some model or stupid actress. What's this fashion mag crap? And she says, you're right, I'm sorry, with all the stress lines. And she's like, don't apologize, it's not your fault. You're doing a good job, Masato. I can sing as much as I want at karaoke. I'll be just fine. And the driver is stressed because he's got the dots. And he says, why don't you go on a karaoke date with Ren? And Masato's like, yeah, totally. And now Nana has sat forward and has like wrapped her arm around his throat. And she says, stay out of it, Hidaki. Just shut up and drive. He says, yes, ma'am, sorry. And Masato says, well, let's go and invite Ren too. And Nana just looks so annoyed and angry. And then she's thinking, I guess it's all right, as long as we're not alone together. And now we have a scene change to the karaoke bar, and it's Yuri. And she's shown up at her cute little Daisy Dukes and has her phone stuffed in her cleavage. And she's like, good morning, with her showbiz smile. It's not even morning. And then Genpai is like, oh no. And Nana is just singing, going, yeah, woo, ee, and Masato is clapping. And then Shin goes, hey, Yuri, heart. And then Ren goes, Yuri, take a seat. And she's like, oh, it's really Ren. I can't believe it. And Genpai says, I can't believe you. Nobu went home. And she says, I know, but he's trying real hard to write songs, so I didn't want to bother him. And then Ren says, that's nice of you. And now she's cuddling up to Ren, and she says, despite how I look, I'm devoted to my man, Heart. And Nana looks really annoyed. And then Genpai's like, I hope Miyu isn't going to show up too. And Yasu says, I emailed her, but I don't know. It's karaoke. And then Ren goes, who's Miyu? And Nana has shoved Yuri away and says she's represented by our agency. And she goes, ow! And Genpai says she was at the Kamakura party. She's an actress, but she's not A-list. You wouldn't know her. You're just being rude because you're jealous. And then Nana says she's Yasu's girlfriend. And then Ren goes, what? And then there's a ring of the phone, and Yasu picks it up and he goes, hey, Miyu, you finished your shooting? Then come on over. And Ren's got the dots. And then Miyu's like, hey, no one's put any songs in. Can I sing? And then Miyu shows up and says, hello, I'm Miyu Shinoda. And Ren just smiles at her. And then Shin says, Miyu, your last name is Shinoda? I didn't know. And she says, that's my real name. My stage name's just Miyu. And Yasu says, I'm gonna hit the loo, while Genpai sings. And Genpai's like, what? Listen to me, honey! And then Ren has stood up. And he's like, me too, heart. And Yasu's got the look like, oh no, he's gonna give me the third degree about my girlfriend. And now they're out in the hall, and Ren says, she's beautiful. You really go for the gorgeous ones, Heart. And he goes, it turns out that way. Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. And Ren says, but she's so little. Is it weird doing it with her? You're so tall. Yasu's got the dots, and then he's like, that's not what you came in here to talk about. If there's something you want to say, just say it. And then Ren's looking at him like, okay, fine. And he's like, you've given up on Rira? And Yasu turns around and he's like, Rira? And Ren is giving him a very serious look, and he says, not Nana. I'll do something about Nana, but I will not let you have her. And Yasu has like this, what the? And then he just kind of smiles, like, oh, okay. And then Ren is like, but I always thought Rira was the only one for you, traitor. And he's like, what are you talking about? God, why does everybody... He's like, but aren't you worried? People are talking about Takumi getting married. Rira's trying to not care, but it's painful watching her. And Yasu says, yes, I am worried. But if I react, she still expects so much from me. I don't want to get too involved when I can't return her feelings. And Ren just looks pensive. And then back in the room, there's a ring. And Masato's picked up the phone. It says, we'd like to add to our order. Because you have to pay for the songs. And then Nana is like, I'm singing this one. It's called Fanauta. And Genpai's thinking, maybe their new song should be like an enka. That might work. And there's a little asterisk that says, Funata is a famous enka song about the singer Yashiro Aki. But I'm not sure what enka is, so I gotta go look stuff up again. Okay, so back in Wikipedia, enka is a Japanese music genre considered to resemble traditional Japanese music stylistically. Modern enka, however, is a relatively recent musical form which adopts a more traditional musical style in its vocalism than Rukoka music, popular during the pre-war years. Okay, it's sentimental ballad music. I don't know if that would work, Genpai, but you know. And then Miyu says, Shin, your phone's going off. And he says, I know. And then she just looks at him. And then Nana's like, then put it on silent. It's annoying. And he's looking at her like, ugh, okay. And then there's a ring of the phone. And it's Rira. And she picks up and she's like, Shin. And he says, knock it off. And she stops and he says, don't call me or email me. You said you didn't want to see me anymore. And she says, but I love you. Please understand that. I still want to be able to talk to you on the phone. And he says, well, that just makes me not want to see you. You're a selfish person. And then he hangs up the phone. And Rira is very sad. And he's running back into the room. And now Rira is crying. And the think boxes say, even when I sing and sing and sing, my voice gets hoarse, and that's it. I'm still irritated. I can't calm down. Yeah, 'cause you're confused and jealous, and there's just so much going on. And now there's a scene change to Takumi and Hachi having dinner at a fancy restaurant. And the think boxes say, you can't make people do what you want. Even if you cry or shout or cling to them. I don't want you to write songs for anyone else but me. Ren's leaving me again, leaving me alone. And it's the next day, and they're in the apartment. And she looks up at him, and then he looks at her, and then there's a pop as she's taking her baby pills. And then he says, Nana, you make the best miso soup ever. Nice and salty, heart. And she's thinking, well, thanks, but that doesn't make me happy. And then there's a ding dong, and she says, it's Kinoshita. Open the door. He said, would you be happy if I left Trap Nest and didn't go to London? And she looks up at him with a huh, and then there's a ding dong. And he says, would you be happy if Hachiko got an abortion and broke up with Takumi? And now her eyes are really wide, like, what? And he goes, ding dong. And he says, would you be happy if Yasu stayed single and by your side for the rest of his life? And then he goes, ding dong. And then he says, enough already, God! And then there's a ring of a phone, and Ren picks it up, and he says, just wait in the car. And his assistant is like, yes, sir, sorry. And he really is reading Nana, but these are all very valid questions. And she's thinking to herself, actually, that is what I want, selfishly. And then she looks very distressed and looks like she's about to cry and says, but really... And he says, that's not really it, is it? And he says, I'm not happy having you wait for me at home making me miso soup. It only works if that's what you want and you're happy with that. Even if I made you, I just feel empty inside. And she says, I just want to sing and I don't want kids. I can't want what you want. And he says, I know. It's the same for me too. I only came to Tokyo because I thought it was my chance to go pro on guitar. But now I feel like I have to stick with Trap Nest. It's my identity. And she looks real sad. And she's thinking about Rira on stage and thinks, I know, but I just can't be happy with that. I can't respect what Ren considers important. I'm suffering because I can't fulfill his desires. I feel lonely because I can't have my desires fulfilled. How can two people like that stay together and be happy? None of the answer is that you can't. And it might have been better for them in this moment if they had just broken up and maybe pretended to be married, you know. And I don't necessarily want that. Because I think that they were good for each other in so many ways. But the codependency is really bad. And her feeling this way is also awful. So she's thinking that's it for real this time. And there's a clack as he sets stuff down and he says, thanks for breakfast. Which is almost kind of away all the way back when we were dealing with Nana's first boyfriend. He said the same thing, but this tone is completely different. And she's thinking, it was nothing. I could have cooked tamagoyaki too. That's a rolled omelet. And then she's thinking, even until the very end, and he says, Nana? And she looks back at him with all the tears, and he says, I'm leaving now. Buy me a jump every week. And then she just kind of stops, and he's looking at her, and she's like, sure, no problem. And then he just smiles, and there's a click of the door, and she's sitting there with a very messy face. And she's like, so it's not over? And then she goes sniff, and then pulls out a cigarette. And is thinking, but even if it's not, nothing's going to change. And then she's thinking about Hachi back in apartment 707 and is like, now I remember how amazing the tamagoyaki Hachi made was. It wasn't salty, but it was fluffy. And she's crying, looking at the empty bowls, and is like, I'll have her teach me how to make it. That much I can do, and keep singing. And now we have a scene change. And Hachi is sob into a handkerchief, and he says, don't cry so much. It's only 2 months. I'm not going off to war. I'll come back alive. And she says, but your plane could crash, or the Demon Lord wouldn't hesitate doing something like that. And he says, don't say stuff like that. And now she's like holding his head to her stomach. And she says, say something to Sachiko too. This might be your last chance. It's your daddy, Sachi. She's so dramatic. And he's got the dots. And he says, please take care of mommy while I'm gone. And then the baby kicks. And Hachi looks so shocked. And she's like, she moved. Sachi talked back. Hey, did you feel it too? And he gets up and he's like, very responsible. Sachiko must be a boy. Stop, Takumi. And he says, all right, I'm off, heart. And she smiles. And then there's a Heihachi. And we have Naoki. And he's like, hey, hello, everyone, heart. And Takumi says, Naoki, you're late. Why even bother coming? I can find a drummer over there. And Rira says, but it sucks. And then Naoki says, oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Heart, England is our home away from home now, heart. Hee hee. And Rira says, if we'd gone there 1 month earlier, we could have celebrated Halloween and Guy Fawkes Day, too. And Ren looks at her and smiles and kind of pats her head and is like, we've got Christmas. Let's all party. And then we have the closeout narration that says, I want to go back to the sea. I want to see everyone. And that is the end of that chapter. Felt surprisingly short, actually. Like, a lot of stuff is happening, but it's almost like nothing kind of happened in that chapter. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in like everyone's feeling so many feelings at once that now we're just kind of marinating in those pieces. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Again, this is going to be my regular thing this month of, a Nana every other day for a little while. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you all in the next one. Good night.